So Boruto Naruto Next Generations episode 43 is finally out, and the title for this episode is The Byakuga Gang Surfaces. So this is an entirely different sort of focus that we have going on in the Boruto series. I mean, we just recently got finished with Boruto completing his very first mission along with Sarada and Mitsuki and their new team captain, Konohamaru, or squad captain. And the previous episode that we actually got last week was the whole, bank heist sort of thing that was going on, where Boruto had to, save the guy from actually, killing himself within the bank. But that was all just a diversion that we found out by the end of the episode, to where it eventually leads into this episode, which it revolves around a much deeper sort of thing that's going on in the Boruto series as of right now. But what makes this episode kind of different to the previous episodes that we have seen in Boruto, while we have seen Boruto go up against, various villains in the series so far, and they each have their own little motive as to why they are doing things, if anything, it's always been bad, bad, bad. I'm bad, I want to do this, and I mean, I do have my motivations and such as to why I'm doing this in the first place, but more so it's just for the wrong reasons necessarily. But in this episode of Boruto, we actually get introduced to a new type of character. We don't really know the name of this character as of right yet, but when it comes down to this new villain, quote-unquote, that we have, or antagonist that we have going on in this focus of Boruto that we're in right now, is that this individual is basically doing bad things, which is stealing from the rich, but in turn, he is compensating that by giving resources, or money in other cases, to much poorer communities, so to speak. So it really brings up a moral dilemma as to whether this, individual is morally right or morally wrong, and that's exactly what goes on in this episode. And even in this episode, we even see Boruto contemplating as to whether the individual that, they're trying to track down is morally wrong or morally right in his decisions, because he knows for a fact that the individual that he is trying to, capture is necessarily wrong in the case of stealing, because no matter who you steal from, it's still a bad decision on your part. But at the same time, Boruto feels for the individual as to why he's doing this in the first place, because he is providing essential resources to poor communities that actually do need this. So essentially, we are kind of seeing like a Robin Hood sort of aspect of this series of Boruto, and I kind of like it, at least when it comes down to this focus of the episodes that we have seen, because as I said before, up to this point, we've pretty much just seen, Boruto go up against various villains who are technically morally bad, but when it comes down to, at least this episode of the villain, quote-unquote, that we see in this episode of Boruto, it's actually, providing a moral dilemma as to whether this guy's actions can be justified or not. So it's kind of like a debate, and I'm actually curious, what do you guys think about that sort of Robin Hood sort of aspect in this series? Like, what are your personal thoughts on that? Let me know in the comments. I'm actually curious. We also got a bit more focus on Shikadai in this episode, as he's trying to come up with various strategies that his father is teaching him. Apparently, his motivation behind this is that simply, he can get money out of it from his father. But, it's kind of cool to see Shikadai, contemplate some strategies as to how certain things work. And also, I like how the episode kind of focused on that, Shikadai presents himself as the king, so to speak, and, the pawns have to protect the king. They each fill a role to serve the king, so to speak. And we actually see Shikadai make a personal connection with the antagonist of this episode of Boruto, and it seems as, the battle was going between, the shogi battle, going between him and Shikadai, it seemed as though the individual really thought of himself as just a pawn to people in general. He sees himself as a pawn and someone that is just, pretty much just to serve someone up until the point of his death. That is solely his existence. It seems as though he has lived a life filled with that, and his existence is to serve those in need, but it doesn't really seem as though, you know, it seems he finds much satisfaction with it, I'm assuming. I mean, I'm sure there's more to his character, but I find the whole concept between, you know, the pawn and the king very, very interesting, because there was actually an instance in which the antagonist, you know, said to Shikadai, "What is your father's role in all this?" And Shikadai says, basically, my father's role is to, you know, he's an aide to the Hokage, so to speak, which is essentially the Hokage's pawn, if you really think about it. So I like, you know, the whole talk between the pawns and the kings, and I'm assuming that we will see that a lot more as, you know, this little mini arc or whatever have you of Boruto is going on, the little focus that we have of these few episodes coming up. So yeah, and you know, I'm just quite interested to see more about this individual, learn more about him, because apparently he can use ice ninjutsu, which is pretty awesome. And I think I mentioned before that apparently there were speculations about that this episode could possibly focus on Kakashi's girlfriend, or, you know, the Kakashi novel, so to speak, because apparently I guess Kakashi's girlfriend can use some ice ninjutsu or what have you. I honestly have no idea if that is true or not. I haven't read the novel, but it doesn't really seem to be focusing on that sort of aspect. I mean, this is an entirely different character, and I see no correlation between this individual and Kakashi. You know, so I'm curious as to what that was all about, and maybe we'll get that in the future. I have no idea, but nonetheless, the individual that we see, you know, who is posing as a threat in these next few episodes of Boruto is quite interesting, because he can use the ice ninjutsu. So that I personally find very interesting. But probably the most interesting part of this episode is that we actually got to see the mad scientist, so to speak, in this episode of Boruto. Now, I don't really remember if we have seen him in previous episodes of Boruto. I could be wrong on that. But he appears yet again. If you guys remember this individual, I'll put, you know, a picture right on the screen as to who this is. He was basically the mad scientist in the Boruto movie. Now, he plays a big role in, you know, basically the future technology of the Hidden Leaf Village. He is a scientist after all, so he has a big role into different gadgets and stuff like that that we will see be produced in the Boruto series as it goes on from here on out, especially when it comes down to the Chunin exams. Once we get to that point, I'm sure some of you who have seen the movie will know what I'm talking about, but just to avoid spoilers for people who haven't seen the movie, I'm going to leave it off on that note. But we'll most likely see a lot more from this individual, because he does appear in the Boruto movie. So I like how it seems like we are getting a little bit closer to the Chunin exams if this character is being introduced. So yeah, honestly, I think that's pretty much about it when it comes down to this episode of Boruto as far as the main things to talk about. I thought this was a good episode. I mean, it wasn't, you know, the most extravagant thing, but I think it was pretty good. I mean, it was a little bit of a setup to what we can expect in the future episodes of Boruto. Hopefully things, you know, actually get a little bit more interesting, and then we can actually see some cool confrontations play out. I would love to see that, but I liked what the episode provided as far as, you know, the whole king and the pawn aspect, and then you also have the moral struggle between, you know, the rich and the poor, and also just Boruto trying to morally decide whether this guy's actions are can be justified or not. You know, what he knows the individual is doing is bad, but at the same time, as the Hokage's son, he probably feels responsible, you know, to the sense to actually to help these individuals, even though he knows, you know, what this guy's doing is bad. And, you know, like it just provides a moral struggle, you know. But I'm assuming, you know, eventually, you know, this little arc, what have you, will be concluded with either the individuals from the poor community being accepted into the Hidden Leaf, and then they can live a better lifestyle there, or either, you know, the Hidden Leaf will eventually provide for those individuals in need and help them out, you know, because I highly doubt that the Hidden Leaf Village will just leave, you know, these poor communities in the rut, so to speak. But we'll see how, you know, the episodes go on from here on out. So yeah, let me know what you guys thought about this episode of Boruto in the comments down below. I thought it was alright. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to give this video a like, and hit that red subscribe button if you want to see more. And with that said, thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one.